Welcome to Advanced Data Analysis 1 with me, Erik Erhardt, Professor of Statistics at the University of New Mexico. In this video, I'll help you get started with Class 6, Figure Arrangement, Captions, and Cross-Referencing within a Quarto document. And I am recording this video about a year after the other class helping videos. So we'll go down to Class 6 here. Figure arrangement, captions, and cross-references. There is no R Markdown or Quarto document here. That means it must be included in the outline file. So I will go over to RStudio and open up my outline file, my outline.qmd, and I'll go ahead and render it. While that is compiling or rendering, that was pretty quick. I will find Class 6, click on the table of contents. I'm now within the browser looking at the output from the Quarto document. And here is our rubric. I'll zoom in a little bit. So we've got 4 goals. We're going to reorganize the plots from the previous assignment. The class numbers may differ from what is listed here because I've renumbered many of the class assignments from last year to this year, from 2021 to this year is 2022. So we're going to take the 2 sets of plots from class 5, the bivariate plots, and we're going to use plot grid and Quarto to create captions and cross-reference them from the text. It has 4 parts. We've got something to do for our numeric plots and something to do with our categorical plots. For our numeric plots, we're going to use this package called cowplot. I think cow is part of the person's name who developed the plotting routine, and it's a very nice package for taking ggplot graphical objects and arranging them. I use it all the time. I haven't found anything better. And we're going to use that to create a single figure that has separate panels. Okay. Then for the second part, we're going to use categorical plots, and instead of arranging them in a single figure, we're going to use the Quarto chunk options to lay it out into side-by-side images. And we're going to create captions that point to panel 1, or panel A and panel B. Okay. Part 3 is to use captions to describe both sets of plots. Okay. And Part 4 is to cross-reference those plots from the text. And we already have interpretations from the previous assignment, so we will reuse those here, just cross-referencing from the text. All right, that's everything that's here. Therefore, everything must be in the Quarto document from the website. So if I go back to the website tab and I scroll up, here's how I would get started. I'm going to open up the HTML tab and I'm going to open up the QMD tab. First we'll look at the HTML tab to see what the output looks like so we know what we're going to be doing. And then we're going to just copy all the code from the QMD file and arrange it so that it suits the rubric based on our own work. So here is my example file. I'll scroll down to class 6 and I'll click there. Okay, there's the rubric again. I'll scroll down. I've got some notes there. For pedagogical purposes, I reproduce the plots and illustrate the cross-referencing below. This allows me to separate for you the original creation of the plots from the step of arranging and cross-referencing them. While I show the chunk options in the HTML file below, it's best to look at the QMD file to see the chunk options. Okay, so let's just walk through what I'm doing, and then we'll go do it. So here's a section, a subsection I've created for the bivariate numeric response plots using plot grid. So I've got 2 plots here. Now I'm going to zoom back out a little bit. Oh, and of course when you zoom, it jumps you all over the place, which is terribly annoying. Okay, here I am again. Sorry about that. All right, here's the numeric response. So here's the first plot. Okay, I've got all my code, and each line goes into this object P, and at the end I'm going to assign P to P1. That's my first plot. Okay, I've got two plots. Then I'm going to, and notice that these two plots are copied from above. So I didn't make new plots, I just took the plots that I had before. Then I've got a box plot. Okay, so here's another new plot. So the first one was age versus total cigarettes smoked. I wonder why it jumps like that. I should be able to scroll, but then the blocking sort of stops working. Anyway, age versus total cigarettes smoked. And the second one is depression versus total cigarettes smoked. Okay, and the second one I assign from P to P2. So now I have these two objects, P1 for the first plot and P2 for the second plot, and I want to arrange those together. I write here, look at the help for cow plot, : plot grid, right? If you put a question mark before a command, it will bring it up in the help. And let's go do that. I'm going to copy that, bring it over here, go to the console, paste it, press enter, and that will bring this command up in the help tab. I may have arranged my tabs differently than what you have on yours. But there's lots of options here. Some that I often use are aligning left and right, relative widths of the plots, relative heights of the plots. For relative widths are for the columns of the plots, and relative heights are for the rows of this plot. We're going to make a grid. Imagine like making a tic-tac-toe board where you're filling in, say, 9 plots. But maybe you don't want all the columns to be the same width, and you don't want the rows to be the same heights. Relative widths and relative heights do that. Labels are nice. You can do, A, B, C for each panel of the plot, and there's some font options here, and so on. So the ones I usually use are align and these relative widths, as well as the number of rows and number of columns. Those are the main ones. Oh, and labels. Okay, so most of the ones up here at the top. All right, so let's go over to the code. There are many options I don't use. Yeah, I put the P1 and the P2 into a list. Here's the list, P1, P2. And that's the input to plot grid, and that's the list of plots. I'm going to put them into one row, and number of columns, it's just going to let it take as many columns as it needs to plot all of the plots in the list. In this case, there'll be 2 columns. And labels with capital auto means it will do capital A, capital B, capital C, each of the Roman letters. Let's see what else I wrote up here. In the code chunk, I specified a label and a figure caption. Yes. Okay. So then in the code chunk, I have these additional options which we'll be able to see in the QMD Quarto document, but not in the output. And this specifies a label, and that's how you can cross-reference it from the text. Right, so each figure will have a label that you can refer to. It has the caption, and this is actually the text that appears under the plot. I also increased the size of the plot by changing the width, and the default units are inches, 8 inches and 6 inches for the width and the height. Big enough so that it can accommodate 2 plots. From the text, I use the chunk label, so this is the label for the plot, as a cross-reference. Note that I have to manually specify panels A and B, and I just copied the previous interpretations. Okay, so I recommend looking at the QMD file for these chunk options. So here's what it looks like. I don't love having the interpretations above. Oh, you know what? I think I just think I just updated that. I did. I refreshed the page. The interpretations are at the bottom. Okay, so here's what, well, we don't really see everything because there's some chunk options that are set up. I create the plot and I print it. Okay. When I print it, oh, it's a little bit too tall. That's okay. Notice that there's the labels A and B for the two panels. That comes from this labels command argument in the plot grid function. That's what gives A and B. Then I scroll down. There's a caption, figure 1, blah, 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 A, blah, B, blah. Okay? And that figure caption is coming directly from the code chunk option. We'll see that, you know, the code chunk starts with triple. Actually, let me just jump over there. I'll show you both things at the same time. Okay, here's class 6. Here's the code that creates the plots, P1, P2. Pretty sure I put the interpretation underneath, so I don't know why that's there. Class 6. Okay, anyway, here is the code chunk that creates the plot. I'll zoom in a little bit. So we start our code chunk. Then all of this stuff is the chunk options. The label, the caption. So this text here is what appears underneath the plot. Okay, so let's go back to the output. Okay, so I've got my plot, A and B labels. I've got my caption. Okay, interpretation. In figure 1A, notice it's even a hyperlink. So if I were to click on it, I'll do that right now, it'll jump to the top of the plot. So in figure 1A, blah, 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 that's the interpretation that I had from before. And then in figure 1B, blah, 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 that's the interpretation from before. So let me go back over to the source, the QMD file, and it should be showing up below, but anyway, it's right up here. Interpretation. In the @ sign, and then there's the figure label. That is the same as this label here. And then I manually had to put in the A for panel A. And then I just copied the interpretation. And then the second one is in @ the figure label, and then B. And that automatically numbers the figures throughout the document. It starts with figure 1 and figure 2, figure 3, etc. as you create more figures. Never, never, never manually number your figures or your tables, because there's always a better way to do it where it will automatically number it for you. And that way, when you add a figure or remove a figure, you don't have to go through your entire document manually renumbering every figure and table number. Let the technology do the counting for you. You can focus on the higher level thinking. Okay, so that covers a lot of the rubric. If we go back to the rubric, we created the cow plot using plot grid. We used the caption, and we did the cross-referencing. Awesome. The second one is similar in that we're going to create two plots side by side and reference them, but it's a different style. So the reason I'm showing you both is because there's different scenarios where one will work better than the other. So let's take a look at the categorical plots. And this time, instead of using cowplot to create a grid of plots, we're going to put each plot into its own sub-figure within a figure, and each one will have its own caption. So we'll scroll down and look at that result. That's the numeric one, and here's the categorical response. Okay, using Quarto chunk options. I've now also added a fig subcaption, or the caption for a subfigure, which appear under each figure. Let's take a look at what it is. So I've got a plot, okay, blah, blah. Okay, so here is figure 2, categorical response bivariate plots. If I scroll up, here's the first plot, and you can see it's got an A and a caption. And then under the second one, there's a B and then a caption. Okay. And from the plot, or from with the interpretation, you know, I'm saying the categorical response bivariate plots are in figure 2. And then you can give the interpretation, and this this is all one link, including the letter A. So if I click on figure 2B, let's see if it jumps up to figure 2B and not figure A. 2B. Yep, right there. Cool. So those hyperlinks are really precise now. All right, let's go see how this is done. For the first, I think I'll just start by, I'll finish reading. Let's do that. I've now also added figure subcaptions, so I'm going to be referring to this text down here. They must be specified in the same order as the plots are printed, and their cross-reference labels appends a suffix of -1, -2, etc. to the figure captions. In the interpretation below, I've included the cross-reference parenthetically at the end of the first sentence describing them, which is another common style of doing citations or cross-references from the text. These are the chunk options used below, and of course, see the QMD file. So we've got the label. So I use similar labels in both ones, figure, bivariate, plots, and I think the first one I did above was NUM for numeric, and this is CAT for categorical. I've got the main figure caption, categorical response bivariate plots, and then the subcaptions, you use these hyphens, and then for each one you type out the label. Notice I've got some /n's in there. A /n starts a new line. I think probably those would be better if they were removed from here, so that it could just wrap normally. I probably used that in a previous plot and should have replaced that with a space. Anyway, layout, the number of columns equals 1. Okay, so in this case, because I had sort of wide plots to fit them on the page, I just had one column. There are other ways of laying this out. I've got an option here. You could do, oh, by the way, they call this this leading symbol, set of symbols before each chunk option, hash pipe. Okay, so hash mark and then pipe. So it's easy to remember. So we got hash pipe, layout colon, and this is one way to do it on one row. So this takes one row, and if you think of it as that the width of the row is 100%, it's going to take the first 45% of the width and dedicate that to the first plot. It's going to take the last 45% of the width and dedicate it to the second plot. And I think the way the syntax is here, if it's a minus number, it's going to be empty space. So 10%, it's going to create a little 10% buffer between the two plots. Okay, so that's, if you have narrow plots, you could put them on one row like that. Finally, the figure width and the figure height is for each of the individual figures, not the total figure. Does that make sense? Each panel of the figure. So panel A, the first one, is 5 inches wide and 3 inches tall, and panel B is also the same size. Okay. Then I just copied and pasted 2 of my plots. Here's the first plot. It's got depression versus nicotine dependence. And the second one, oh, and notice I put all my P's, right, and then I print it. Boom. So that's the first plot. Then the second plot is total cigarette smoke versus nicotine dependence. I put all my layers on the plot, and then I print it. So each time I print a plot, it's going to put it into a new panel. And then the results follow. So let's go and look at the QMD file there shouldn't be any surprises here. Plotting bivariate categorical response. Here are this first set of chunk options is really just there to display in the text. That's the stuff that we just looked at. This one that has the brace R is where it actually runs. So I've got the label, the caption, the subcaption, etc. I create plot 1 and plot 2. There's the end of plot 2. And finally, in the interpretation, the whole figure caption, we'll go back and look at this in a moment, is specified with that figure label. And if you want to refer to each of the sub figures, you do the same thing, but then you add -1 for letter A and -2 for letter B, etc. for each of the subcaptions. So if I scroll down to that text, you can see here's figure 2 without A or B, but here we've got A that's has the -1, and then figure B that had the -2 suffix on the end of the figure label. Okay, so that's everything. The last part of this video is I'll just go ahead and do it as though I was you doing the assignment, okay? But I believe that from this introduction, you'll probably understand what to do. All right, so now I'll go over to RStudio. Let's give ourselves some space to work, okay? I think we've already looked at the outline file. I think that's this one. Yeah, this is our outline file that we're working in. We don't have any results here. Okay, so here's what I would do. I'd go over to the QMD file and I would go to this section. Here's class 6. Under the rubric, okay, it's got these call out notes. I probably don't need those as a student. And I'm just going to copy everything, and then I'm going to delete anything that doesn't apply to me, and then replace it with my stuff. So back over to RStudio, search for class 06. There we are, and here's some space for me to work. So I'm just going to paste it in here. It's okay. Lines for where I am, it's about line 480 down to 650. Okay, so starting at the top of this code, well, these aren't my, if I was you, these aren't my plots. So I'm going to delete these plots. I'm not going to delete the P equals P1 because that's where I'm assigning it. Okay, so we've got one plot there. We have a second plot here that we need to go get. There's a bunch of text in here. I'm just going to leave it because later in my life, when I look back at this document, I say, oh, how did I make those side-by-side plots when in a grid? This text might, remind me how that works. So it's okay to leave some of the text in. The interpretations are going to basically go away, but I'm going to leave the cross-reference parts. Okay. And oh, you know what? I want to put the interpretation underneath. It is a better place to put it. Okay. It will probably be underneath by the time you get to this, underneath the cow plot, arranged plot. But okay, that's a good start. Let's go grab those plots. So I'm going to get my scatter plot and box plot from class 5. Oh, you know what? I am looking at the wrong file. Okay, give me a second to figure out what have I done. Okay, that's fine. I want to open this video one instead. Okay, this is what I meant to be working on. That other caption or outline file was totally blank, and this one has class 5 from the beginning of the semester to class 5. So this is where I want to be. I want to go back over here. I'm copying all that QMD stuff from my example file into my assignment. Okay. And now I'm going to go back and do the same thing. I apologize. So here we are, class 6. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to delete the code chunk, or the plot code and the plot code. And I'm going to delete the captions except for the label cross-references, and go get some plots from above. All right. Those plots better be there now. Okay, good. There's one plot. This is a... Oh, I think those are categorical plots. Let me keep going. Okay, we want to go to class 05-1. There's 05-1. Here is the first plot. It is a scatter plot. I will copy this into here. Okay, and then it's hard to, sometimes I say to myself, okay, line 1375. I'm going to go back there. 1375, scrolling up. This is the second plot. It's the box plot. I copy that one. 1375. Okay, good. That worked. Now, if I want to see the result, oh yeah, move the interpretation below my cow plot. Okay, so if I want to see the result of my plot grid, I've got to run the code from the top. Remember first to set session working directory to your source file location. Run the code from the top. Let's see. Something broke. All right, so the last command that ran was my plot missing code. And I think that this is unlikely to be a problem in yours. I did just update the package on my computer. So I just restarted R. You can do that with session restart R. Just in case. Here's the plot missing code. That time it worked. Okay. Don't sweat it. I had, right before I started the video, I did go to my packages and I updated all the packages. Probably I should have restarted R after I updated the packages, and I think that was the problem. Okay, so I've created, let's make my plot window a little bigger. Sometimes when you've got a plot in there and you're resizing, notice how I just resized it and it takes some time. Sometimes it's better to just clear all your plots with the broom. When the plot tab is open, click the broom, get rid of all your plots that are previously been put in there, then it's a little easier to resize. Okay, so we created, recall, we've got one plot that's called P1. So down in the console, I'm going to type P1 and press enter. It takes a long time to plot 43,000 points. And then P2 is the second plot. Okay, very good. So that's what we're working with. So just to reorient us in the editor window, here is class 6, the rubric. Here is where we're going to have our numeric response. We've put in our first plot, called it P1, our second plot, called it B2. Then I scroll down a tiny bit. There is a new code chunk for P arranged. That's what I call my array, my plot that is arranged. It's using cowplot. So if I run this code right here, it should put both of them together in one row. While I'm here, I'm going to show you a couple options, and something didn't quite work out right. Let's clear the plot window. Sometimes in these more complicated plots, clearing the plot window helps you get the results you want. All right, so I'm going to click play. Okay, that doesn't look good. I think it's because there's like too many points and it's having trouble plotting them. I bet if we knit this, we get something that looks correct. Let's try. That should make. Problem is, I have such a small workspace to do stuff with you. Is that class 6? Okay, let's reset this again. What happens if we have a little more plot space? Ah, okay. It didn't quite fit in that small space. Very good. So that's what it's going to look like. We've got A and B. By the way, that's sort of a plotting thing that happens regularly. If you just don't have enough space to fit the margins and all the components, like sometimes it tries to do something and then hangs up and basically it gives up knowing that it can't fit into the plot window. So increasing the size is what we just did, just by dragging the margins over. Another way within the plot, if you're creating the output into your document, I wish my captions were a little brighter, but I think you can see there's a hash pipe. Fig width is 8 inches and fig height is 6 inches. You might just increase that several inches to see, if you've got a huge plot, it's always going to create something. So the only problem is when the size that you give, the window that you give it to plot in, is too small. Let me show you another option. If you had null for n rows and you put a 1 for the number of columns, let's try creating that plot. Let's see if it fits. So we should get one column. There we go. We have one column of plots. A is on the first row, B is on the second row. And, yours may actually look better in this orientation, in which case you should do that. Okay, I'm going to do the rows. And that looks great. The other things for you to do are to edit the captions. And you know what? I'm going to change. Oh, that sometimes crashes my RStudio if I do that. Anyway, you can probably keep the label the same, right? So it's the figure, bivariate plots, numeric. I do think that the label has to start with FIG hyphen, but that's what the Quarto documentation says. So start with fig hyphen and then label it whatever you want. Okay, I would just keep it the same in this example. And then figure caption, mine says numeric response bivariate plots. A is total cigarettes smoked versus age, and B is total cigarettes smoked by depression. You should put in what yours are. Okay, and notice I just made A and B, the Y variable versus the X variable. All right, this is going to work just fine. In fact, I could render it at this point. Let me clear my plots so that I can resize this and render it. Now, I haven't copied in my interpretations yet. While it's rendering, I'll go and grab my old interpretations. Okay, here's the interpretation for the second one. Here's the interpretation for the first one. And I've got both of them together in my buffer. And I'll scroll down to where we were. And I'm just pasting in those two interpretations. You'll probably have to go up and down twice. Okay? In figure, okay. Very good. Class 6, click, blah, blah, blah. Oh, there's a plot that is a little bit too tall. So I'm gonna reduce the height of this plot in a moment. But we've got the figure caption, which is there in the, and then we also have the interpretation, which was blank. Okay, so let's go back to RStudio. I've now put in my interpretations. In figure, I've got the @ sign, then the figure label, and then the capital A, because that's the panel letter. Here in the corner, panel A, comma, and I'm just going to make sure I have a lowercase t. The relationship between age and cigarette smoked, blah, blah, blah. That's the same interpretation as before. In figure B, lowercase f, for NESARC participants, blah, blah, blah. Okay. That's all I want you to do. We didn't like the height, or I didn't like the height of that plot. I'm going to go from 6 inches down to 4 or 5 will probably be fine. I'm going to try 4. It's probably a little too short, but, you know. And the only way really to see it is to render it and take a look. The chunks that take a while here are the ones that have plots. So at some point later, you know, as you make this outline file bigger and bigger and bigger, you'll want to disable the plotting of those older figures within your big document, just so that it runs a little bit faster. Okay, I think we can go back over here. Okay, so the height is, this is a much better height. The aspect ratio is about 1:1 for the width to the height, and that isn't necessarily like the right aspect ratio. It's just making an observation. Even, you know, the figure on the left could even be a little wider than the figure on the right. The figure on the right is just two vertical spaces, you know, lines of points. You've got a lot of wasted space. So let me show you how to use that relative figure width that we saw in the help file over here. Relative widths, I'm going to grab that and I'm going to put it here as an argument. Relative widths. So we've got two figures, and let's take a look at it one more time. The title is wide. If we make it narrower, it's actually going to make the title sort of run off. But if we make the whole figure a little bit wider, then we basically just create more space for the one on the left. So let's just try this. I'm going to make the plot on the right, half is a bit severe. Maybe 60%. So the relative widths of the first plot is going to be 1 to 60% on the right. Right? So the plot on the right is 60% the size of the one on the left. I'm also going to make the width of the total plot area from 8 inches to 10 inches. That'll give basically the plot on the left a little more space. So let's render that, and then we'll move on from this plot. Okay, we are at row 14. I'll be patient and not move ahead while this is going. You might, in these pauses when I click render, you might, well, I don't know, I might say something really insightful. I was going to say you can jump ahead 20 or 30 seconds. Okay. Boom, boom. So, right when you render it, it runs in this Backgrounds Jobs tab. And if you scroll to the bottom, Output Created. If you've got that HTML file, it worked. So let's go back over here. That looks pretty good. Gave my left plot a little more space, and the plot on the right is 60% as wide as the plot on the left. that's not the plot, that's not the body of the plot, like the black rectangle. It's from the far left, basically where the B starts, all the way to the rightmost bit of black. All right, that's nice. We learned a couple things. Let's do the second part. All right, so now I'm going to scroll down to plotting bivariate categorical using the quarto chunk options. And this is stuff that I copied and pasted already. Oh, right, if you were to try to render it, these code chunks wouldn't run, right? What's the simplest thing to do to make a code chunk not run? Go to the triple tick, and before the left curly brace, press enter. That makes all the code between the first triple tick and the last triple tick not be interpreted by any language. It's just going to appear, just as your code book just appears. When you have the R after the triple tick, now everything inside is going to be interpreted by the R language. Okay, so that's the easiest way to disable a chunk. Let's see. So right, this is your, we're pretending that this is your assignment. So I'm going to delete both plots completely, and then I'm going to delete both interpretations completely. Okay, I am going to leave the cross-reference to the citation, and we've got a couple extra things here. Okay, and that's it. So now we have to go up, copy the plots, come back down, paste them in here. We're around line 1475, so let's go find those plots. We're looking for assignment 5-2, and we've got a categorical plot right here. Oh, and its interpretation. I'm gonna do this. I'm not gonna do it all at once. It's tempting to do more. Okay. This is the plot right here, mosaic plot. That's the plot code I just copied. Below it is the interpretation. I think I'm going to grab the interpretation while I'm here. And I'll put it with the first reference. All right, plot number 2, the logistic plot. Logistic plot. I've got some tables. I've got the plot right here, and its interpretations right there. Okay, I'm going to paste the plot where it goes, and I'm going to go get the interpretation. Oh, I think that's it. Let me just double check. Logistic scatter plot. That's the interpretation. Okay. And I'm scrolling back down to where it goes. There's the interpretation for the plot that we're just making. Okay. It will probably take you 3 times as long as what I just did, because it's hard to sort of recognize where you are vertically in this very long document and copying the right thing. So, okay. What should we do? Let's make sure that these plots run. Okay, I'm highlighted and press Control Enter. It made that little plot. Looks nice. We'll do the second plot. This one's going to take a little longer because it plots thousands of points. Okay. Then we've got, oh yeah, so then all the magic sort of happens up here in these chunk options. Let me come right back. I'm going to bring this over to another window so I can change the colors, because I realize that this these colors don't really work well to read the captions or the comments. Appearance, and I just need a better dark theme that where you can actually read the comments. One that isn't so totally ugly. That's not bad. Okay, I'm settling on pastel on dark. All right, I'm bringing it down. Okay, where was I? Plotting bivariate quarto chunk options. Here's my code chunk. Here's all my comments that were basically impossible to read before. Here's my two plots, the mosaic plot and the logistic scatter plot. All right, so let's look at the code chunk options. Everything in this one happens up here. So we have the label, fig hyphen, bivariate plots, categorical. Okay, that's how I'm going to refer to these plots. And in fact, if I scroll down just a little bit to the interpretation, categorical response bivariate plots are in, and this is the label, fig bivariate plots cat. The other plots use the same figure label, but I append the suffix -1 or -1 and -2. All right, so let's go back up. Then we say the figure caption. This is the label that's going to appear. If I look back at the results, the figure that appears is, or the caption that appears is here with the figure number. Okay. Categorical response by bivariate plots. Categorical response bivariate plots. Okay. Then I've got figure subcaptions or subfigure captions. Put a hyphen and then the label. I'm going to remove, you know what, I want to take a look at what this that /n did. If I scroll up, it does nothing. It basically just replaced it with a space. So Quarto was smart enough to know that it shouldn't put a line break in there. I'm going to replace it with a space. Oops, hit my microphone. All right, the first figure is, I bet it will work without these quotes. I'm going to remove those quotes. Okay. So the first one is proportion of young adult smokers, etc. The second one is likelihood of nicotine dependence, etc., all the way up to here. Then, so those are the two captions that appear under A and B. Okay. We're laying this out in one column. Okay, and the figure width is 5 and 3 for each plot. Let me show you what the plot layout looks like if we do the one row instead. Okay, I'm just sort of trying to get rid of the other option. I'll just do that. Okay, and we'll render this and we'll see the side by side. Oh yeah, I needed to comment after all the numbers. Okay, it's running. So we should get, and recall from the plots, when you run your code, you just print it. That's the first plot. Then you've got your next plot, and then you print it. That's your second plot. So you automatically get A and B just each time you create a plot. It's going to put it in the right place. Okay, it's almost done. The last thing to be thinking about is your interpretation, and the way I've formatted this one is I have the first sentence of the interpretation, and then parenthetically, so parenthetically I put the label. So in the first right? The very first sentence, I basically say that the bivariate plots are in this figure. You may, in a publication, you may or may not have that type of sentence. Instead, here is the interpretation of the first panel, and I cite that first panel. And then this is the sentence for the second panel, and I cite that after the first sentence. There is a second sentence that relates to it, but I still cite the figure in the first sentence. Let's go take a look at our figure. Oh, that works pretty nice. So I've got the full width of the page. The first 45% of the width on the left is figure A, and it wrapped the subcaption as it needed to. The 45% on the right is figure B. Boy, it doesn't like me to select text. And then there's 10% in the middle that's empty space. I'm realizing 10% in the middle is pretty wide. I'm going to adjust those numbers. So what should we do here? How about what I often do is like 40. Let's try 49. 2% in the middle, and then 49. Okay. These are small details that don't matter in this video, but I also recommend that you do not obsess about these small details. But, make it look good enough. I think that should be everything. Let's go back up to the rubric, and we can always grade ourselves using the rubric. We've made our numerical responses into a grid of plots. We've used Quarto to arrange categorical plots. We put in our captions, and we cross-referenced everything. We're brilliant. All right, we'll go look. I removed a little bit of space. That looks pretty good, actually. 2% is plenty. So that's a nice looking figure with the sentences underneath. Now, I recommend for the purposes of this class and grading that you separate these into separate sentences or sort of separate paragraphs. It makes it a little easier on the grader to find each sentence. But of course, when you're writing this in a research paper, this would all be one paragraph. All right, well, I think we've covered everything. We made some nice plots, and I hope that you'll continue to use these skills throughout the rest of the semester to cite the figures. If you get into this habit of labeling your figures and cross-referencing them from the text, all of your work will really look professional. Furthermore, you know what? I will point you to one more thing. I don't quite know how to find it quickly, but if I go to YouTube, and I never know how to find my own, oh, there's my channel. Okay, I do have a video about, let's see, can I click on it? Okay, go to my channel. Microsoft Word cross-references. So I don't quite know how you would find this. Oops, I can't maximize it because my screen's bigger than my recording window. Microsoft Word cross-references, citations, and special topics. So if you are someone who uses Microsoft Word to do work, which sort of most people are, I collaborate with people who use Microsoft Word all the time, and it's very helpful to know how to show field codes, how to use styles, how to use headings so that it updates table of contents. Don't press enter a bunch of time to get a new page. Use page breaks, how to do line numbering. Tables and figures, this is basically a lot of stuff that we just talked about, doing captions and cross-references. And then I've got a whole section here on using Zotero for bibliography, and then some special topics. So the point is that all of these skills, right, in this 50-minute video, this is how you do all that stuff in Microsoft Word. And if you do it there and you watch this video, 1.5 speed or whatever, in 40 minutes or 30 minutes, you're going to know how to let the computer do all the cross-referencing for you. So I do recommend that. Maybe I will put this link somewhere on the web page. Probably, where's the best place? You will find it. Maybe I'll put it on the day's assignment for class 6. I'll put a link here since it sort of goes along with what we're doing. All right, that is everything. See you in class.